The following are true scary stories from the subreddit Let's Not Meet, as well as the subreddit Creepy Encounters. I'll have links in the description below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more. Let's begin. This is a true story that happened to me years ago. I'm from Germany and worked at a retirement home in a little German town at the time. The facility was in a rural area on the outskirts of town. One night, I had a night shift with a new coworker I never worked with before. He was in his mid-50s, wearing little round glasses, and for some reason seemed a little strange to me on first sight. There always were only 2 workers in the facility at night, and our job was to watch over the 100 rooms on the 3 floors and make control rounds through the whole facility. We weren't allowed to use the elevators for security reasons at night, and had to use the stairway instead. I remember the strange weather that night. It was stormy and wild outside when I started my shift at about 10 p.m. At this time, most of the personnel were gone. Only one older nurse was in the station room on the 2nd floor, where we had our headquarters at night. She wasn't using the newer PC programming, so it was taking her a little longer to finish up her paperwork. My coworker and I started our first round through the house, using the stairways, which had heavy doors we had to close slowly and carefully every time to avoid noise. Everything was quiet. Most of the residents were sleeping already, and after checking all the rooms, we sat down in the 2nd floor station room and finished some paperwork. The older nurse was gone, all the doors to the outside shut, and the house was completely quiet when we were sitting at the table. After 15 minutes of sitting in the quiet, suddenly a heavy door in the hallway smashed hard. We looked at each other and without saying anything, immediately got up and started running to the stairway. I ran up to the 3rd floor and my workmate sprinted down to the ground floor. We saw nothing and nobody. We even checked the stairway and the windows. All were closed. Someone must have been in the stairway, we concluded. As we found nothing, we continued our tour, starting from the 3rd floor down to the ground floor. From there on out, I could not stop thinking about who the hell would sneak around the floors in the middle of the night. It was about 2 a.m. when we had to change the double sheets for an old invalid man who had pissed his bed. I stood in the corner of the room beside the bed, backed up against the wall. My coworker was on the other side of the bed. I remember I was watching the door, just waiting for someone to appear in the room. While I was concentrating on the door and lost in my thoughts, suddenly my coworker freaked out, screaming at the old man, out of nothing, ripping around the sheets and tossing the old man around. His face got an angry, creepy look, and I was totally shocked and not able to say or do anything. I just watched this creepy guy in front of me with the totally blacked out windows behind him and the door leading to the dark floors where some freak sneaked around unseen. I stood there pressed on the wall, in the corner of the room, and totally lost, surrounded by psychopaths. We finally reached the ground floor, and everything was quiet. The only sound was the wind blowing around the house. Suddenly, we heard a dropping sound, like something dropped, a knife or something metallic. The sound came from the kitchen area. We ran to the closed glass door where the sound came from. It was in a long, dark hallway, and a back door leading to the trash cans in a parking lot at the end. We opened that door and searched every single room. I felt extremely uncomfortable and expected to attack every moment. Again, we found nothing. Some hours later, we started our last tour for the night. We split up this time, and I checked the rooms like usual. When I looked in one room, there was an old lady awake and sitting in her bed. She asked me if I was in her room 5 minutes ago. I said no and that we had just started our tour. She told me that 5 minutes ago she clearly heard someone enter her room. She asked who it was and didn't get any answer back. And then the door closed again. I got a creepy feeling while listening to the old lady. I told her to push the alarm button next time something like that happened again. I think it is unnecessary to say how I felt for the next few hours of the night. Every time I entered a room or walked around a corner, I expected some stranger standing there every time. I was more than glad when my damn shift was over. Some days later, I met up with the older nurse who had left the facility late that night, and I told her the story. She told me that the back door to the kitchen area was wide open when she reached her car that night. She had went up to the back door and asked if anyone was in there. Suddenly she got a very bad feeling and turned around and ran to her car and drove off fast. She was totally scared and tried to reach us to warn us, but she couldn't find the number anywhere. I told her that the back door was definitely closed when we checked the area. We never found that creepy freak sneaking around there that night, and many night shift workers reported similar experiences the following month. The coworker I had to work with that night was fired after more and more complaints about his person emerged over time. Anyway, I'm glad I don't have to work there anymore, and I'm never going to work the night shift again. When my best friend and I were younger, we would ask our babysitter to take us to the school playground at night so we could play hide and seek. We lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone and were friendly with one another, so this wasn't abnormal or dangerous, at least not at the time. One night, we went over and it was past our bedtime, but our parents were cool and let us stay up late to play hide and seek. At one point, I was the one trying to find my friend and babysitter. As I looked for them, a car drove slowly by the playground. Their lights were off and the windows were tinted. I watched them as they drove by and felt as though they were watching me. When they were out of sight, I instantly forgot about it and went back to seeking. It came to be around midnight and our babysitter thought that it was time to go. Of course, we begged to stay a little longer, but he said that it was late. We started to walk up the hill that was behind the school. We all then heard a car behind us and looked over to see the same car driving on the grass towards us. My babysitter instantly grabbed us both and threw us over his shoulders and started running towards the bushes that cut us off from the other street. The car started to speed up and so did my babysitter. When we got into the bushes, my babysitter forced us through the rose bushes and up the metal fence. I ended up getting cuts everywhere, but worst of all, I cut my leg on the fence and it was bleeding badly. I could hear the driver of the car calling to us, asking in a kind voice where we were, and then in a serious and scary voice, saying he knew we were there. We ended up getting to a house that had lights on, and our babysitter banged on the door, begging to let us in and that he had kids and one was bleeding really badly. The woman, who we knew was Emily, opened the door and pretty much dragged us in and shut the door behind us and locking it. Later in the night, the police were called, and I was sent to the hospital to get stitches and a shot for the rusty metal that cut my leg. It doesn't in there, though. Later that week, my dad was watching the news as usual, and a news story came up. It showed the playground where we were a couple of nights ago, and showed medics rolling a body covered in a white sheet into an ambulance. The girl had been dead for a couple of days, and her body hadn't been there very long. The killer has never been found, so he could still be out there. Sometimes I wonder, if the man in the car did get us, would we have been in the same situation that girl ended up in? Would she have been the one watching the news when our bodies rolled into that ambulance? It makes me feel guilty, but I will never and have never stepped another foot onto a playground since. And whoever that man in the car was, if you were the one that killed that poor girl, let's never meet again. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you can see all my future videos. And remember, it's always scarier if it's true.